Hey there, come on in. We've got a great show today on the Armed Forces Reserve Medal. All 6 variations of it and all of the multiple attachments that go to it to tell its history. And best of all, we're going to look at examples of how members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard display their Armed Forces Reserve Medal.
Hello and welcome to Veterans Medals Workshop. I'm Frank Foster, your host, and I'm glad to have you with us today because we're going to talk about a very interesting medal, the Armed Forces Reserve Medal. And, well, it's the only medal in the inventory that has 6 different backs to honor, in order to give a different medal to the Army Reserve, the Army National Guard, the Air Guard and Air Reserve, the Naval Reserve, the Marine Corps Reserve, and the Coast Guard Reserve. And was that 6? You're going to have to check it out by watching the show, and you'll get to see each one. Additionally, I'm going to show you some incredible examples of how these members of the Armed Forces Reserve have displayed their awards for service in, in order to earn them, you probably at least went to maybe Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Somalia, Haiti, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia. It's been a very busy 10 to 20 years lately, and you'll be surprised at how many times members of the reserve forces have been mobilized. And you'll see that all of the different devices that go on. A really interesting medal, and you're about to learn all about it. So let's go take a look. Oh, by the way, special thanks to Medals of America and Fountain Inn for providing all the medals and displays today. And if you enjoy these, please give us a like, and, even better, quite honestly, please subscribe. It'll keep us on the air. Okay, let's go take a look, see what you can learn.
The Armed Forces Reserve Medal was authorized in 1950, that's over 70 years ago, for 10 years of honorable or satisfactory service within a 12-year period as a member of one or more of the reserve components of the armed forces. In 1996, a bronze letter M mobilization device was authorized members of the U.S. Reserve components who were called to active duty in support of designated operations on or after 1 August 1990. Units called up in support of Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield were the first units to be authorized the M device. If an M device is authorized, the medal is awarded even though the service might be less than 10 years. Previous to this change, only bronze hourglasses were awarded at each successive 10-year point, the first hourglass at the 20-year point. The front of the medal depicts a flaming torch placed vertically between a crossed bugle and a powder horn. 13 stars and 13 rays surround the device. The front of the medal is the same for all of the services. Only the reverse is different, and we'll take a look at that now. As I mentioned earlier, there are 6 variations to the back of the medal. Starting on the upper right-hand side, the topmost left one is the Army Reserve back, which has a Minuteman in the center of it with 13 stars. Then the Navy version, which has a sailing ship with an anchor on it, with an eagle with wings spread. Then to the right of that is the Marine Corps version, which has the eagle, globe, and anchor in the center. The Air Force version has an eagle with the wings spread in front of a circle with clouds. The Coast Guard emblem has the Coast Guard emblem with crossed anchors on it. And the National Guard has the National Guard insignia on the reverse. The medal comes in several different formats. It's issued in a bronze medal. It's also available in anodized or gold-plated. There are miniature versions of the medal available. The medal reverses I mentioned, in this particular case I'm showing the Marine Corps version. There's 5 other variations. It comes with a regulation ribbon bar, an enamel lapel pin. There's even a hat pin or mini ribbon. In this case, the Navy version is identical. It's issued in the same various formats. It just has a different backing as shown on the reverse here. Don't worry about the devices shown up above. I'm about to give you an overload on that in just a second. As a quick preview before I overload you with all the details on the devices, the best part of this show is going to be looking at the various veterans cases that display their Armed Forces Reserve Medal. For example, on the far left here is an Army sergeant who displays his Reserve Medal with mobilization device in the lower right-hand corner of his display just before his NATO medal for service in Bosnia. The Air Force Command pilot displays his just before his Vietnamese campaign medal. If you're paying attention, you'll note there is no hourglass on his Armed Forces Reserve Medal. There was no hourglass awarded for the first 10 years prior to 1996. The display case on the right shows a young Marine who was mobilized for service in Afghanistan, where he received the Purple Heart. After we look at the devices, you'll get to see some really handsome display examples. Shown here on the upper ribbons are the 3 hourglass devices, the bronze one for 10 years service, silver for 20, and gold for 30, and yes, there is a variation for 40. The lower left ribbon shows the M device indicating mobilization, and to the right of it is the M device with the numeral 3 on the right indicating 3 mobilizations. It's a really great example. If you start on the left-hand side and going from the top to the bottom, you see the bronze hourglass for 10 years service, the silver hourglass for 20, the gold for 30, and a gold and bronze for 40. In the center, the M device for first mobilization. A second mobilization goes with the Arabic numeral 2, third with 3, 4, so on. Over on the right-hand side, you see how the hourglass and the M device would go together. And in some cases, you will see the hourglass, the M device, and the Arabic numeral. I doubt if you noticed it on the introduction, but the Navy Chief's device had a bronze hourglass, an M for mobilization, and the Arabic numeral 3 to indicate he'd been mobilized 3 times. Wearing the devices on a full-size medal, for example, the Navy has a lot of flexibility. You can either go across horizontally if a medal is being completely displayed, or if it is in a group and the overlapping medals would hide the devices, then you can place them vertically. This Army Master Sergeant chose his reserve service after the Vietnam War that it included Desert Storm and Iraq, and you can see multiple awards of the mobilization device on his Army Reserve Medal, along with a lot of other important awards. Wow, kudos to the sergeant. Here's another Army Reserve Master Sergeant, and you can see by his awards that he was called up and mobilized for the Iraqi campaign. I really like the way he used the commemorative badges at the bottom to indicate his service as a combat engineer and in the combat armor unit. This reserve artillery captain shows his mobilization device right in the center of his Armed Forces Reserve Medal just before his NATO medal for Bosnia, and above that are his medals reflecting his service in Afghanistan and his combat action badge. This final Army display shows an infantry captain in the reserves who's been mobilized twice, has over 10 years service in the reserves, and has served in both Afghanistan, Iraq, probably Bosnia, and Kosovo. He has a handsome set of awards that honor his service to our country, and what a dedicated reservist. This Marine display case shows the career awards of a highly decorated Marine colonel who was awarded 3 different times with the Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross. Note that his Armed Forces Reserve Medal does not have an hourglass, which was not approved for award for the first 10 years until 1996. This Marine Corps non-commissioned officer shows that he has been mobilized once and has over 10 years service in the reserves and had service in Desert Storm. Here's a Master Gunnery Sergeant with 3 mobilizations. This senior non-commissioned officer displays his awards with over 25 years of active and reserve service. His Armed Forces Reserve Medal shows 20 years with reserve service and 3 mobilizations. Here's a very nice example of how an Armed Forces Reserve medal would be mounted with the M device when wearing full-size medals. You can see 6 medals here mounted for wear by a member of the United States Marine Corps Reserve. Here's a great Air Force case. The case is an example of an Army Air Force pilot who served through 5 campaigns in the Pacific and until 1974 in the Air Force Reserve. Note the Europe and Japan bars on his Army Occupation Medal and the hourglass on his Army Reserve Medal. This amazing Air Force case shows World War II and Korean War service. The Major's case tells he enlisted before World War II, was wounded in Europe, and was a prisoner of war, received a Distinguished Flying Cross and the French Cross of War, and later served 3 campaigns in Korea. The UN Service Medal, ROK War Service Medal, and the ROK Presidential Unit citation are shown, as well as his Reserve Medal indicating over 10 years service. This Air Force Major proudly displays her service during the Cold War and includes her Air Force Commendation Medal, National Defense Medal, and Armed Forces Reserve Medal. What a nice display. This Air Force officer proudly displays his awards to include his Armed Forces Reserve Medal with a silver hourglass indicating over 20 years service in the reserves. This Air Force Master Sergeant's awards show he served in Korea during peacetime and was mobilized for service in Afghanistan. Note 5 awards of the Air Force Reserve Meritorious Service Medal, a really nice display honoring his service. This Air Force Reserve Master Sergeant was mobilized to serve in the War on Terror. Personal decorations show exemplary service. This Coast Guard Senior Chief has a remarkable display of military awards. Not only does it indicate over 30 years service in the reserve by the gold hourglass and the M that indicate mobilization on his Armed Forces Reserve Medal, but he also has the very rare Coast Guard Silver Life-Saving Medal, as well as a Good Conduct Medal for active and reserve service. This is truly a remarkable display. And if you want to know a little more about the rare Coast Guard Silver Life-Saving Medal, check out our video on the 5 military medals for heroism while not in combat. And you'll see that the Silver Life-Saving Medal is a very rare award, and the Coast Guard is the only one that accepts it as a personal decoration. This Coast Guard veteran of the Cold War proudly displays his military ribbons over his full-size medals, and you can see he has over 20 years service in the reserve because of a silver hourglass on his Armed Forces Reserve Medal. This Coast Guard Chief displays his rank insignia and skill badge over his ribbons and full-size medals. And when you look at his Armed Forces Reserve Medal, you can tell he's had over 20 years service in the reserves and has been mobilized twice. If you've been paying attention, you know that this Coast Guard Chief received his Armed Forces Reserve Medal before 1996 because it doesn't have an hourglass on it. We'll wrap up with a display that is not as unusual as you might think because we have many members of the service who serve in 2 different branches. This display shows a former Marine service in Vietnam and later service as an Army reservist mobilized for active service in Operation Desert Storm. His bronze hourglass indicates over 10 years of reserve service, and the M device shows 1 mobilization. A really magnificent display.
Thanks for joining us today for our show on the Armed Forces Reserve Medal. I think you've learned a lot, all the different variations of it, all the different attachments that go on it, and best of all, you've seen some incredible examples how members of the Armed Forces Reserves have displayed their awards, which they've earned serving our nation. And you're a little surprised, I'm sure, at how many times some of these members have been called up and mobilized. You should be proud of them. If you see one somewhere, well, offer to buy him a beer, or even better, buy him lunch. Okay, thanks for joining us on Veterans Medals Workshop. We'll see you next time.